Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout. Today we're going to be doing a starter's guide, sort of Fallout 2, and kind of what I would recommend building and kind of how I'd recommend going about this. Similar to what I did in Fallout 1, giving you guys ideas for potential builds, or at least my thoughts on those builds. So first up in Fallout 2, you can pick your class from any of the starting characters. This is the same that you could in Fallout 1, so you can take these characters. It would also remain the same in Fallout Tactics if you want to take these characters, or you can build your own. So we have Narg, Mingan, Chitsa, and yeah, that's everybody. So you can pick between these three, and it's kind of interesting. At least they did give like each one of them 10 and something. So let's go over to the character creator and we will kind of go over all of the stats. What they mean, these are roughly going to be the same as they were in Fallout 1. So just kind of keep that in mind. However, some of them are a little bit better or worse in Fallout 2 just because of how many things have changed throughout the Fallout games. So first up, name. You can pick whatever name you'd like. Doesn't matter. Just pick your name. There isn't any like bonus for picking a certain name. Same thing goes with age. And there isn't a huge difference between male or female other than your interactions between certain characters. It will also affect one of the traits in Fallout 2, which is called sex appeal, which does make it so you can have more favorable conversations with the opposite gender of your character, but less favorable ones for the same. This is mostly for speech checks. It's very similar to like how Lady Killer and Black Widow would work later in like Fallout 3. So if you're going to take that, then know that that can affect certain things throughout the game. However, if you're going with like high speech or high charisma or both, then this may not actually be all that big of a factor regardless. So let's start out with the special stats. First up, we got strength. Strength determines what weapons you can use. You do need to meet the strength requirements in order to wield the weapon effectively. If you don't, you will get penalties in terms of accuracy. So this is about 20% per level of strength that you're missing based on the weapon. Now, strength doesn't matter too much because you only need to get up to about 7 strength in order to wield any weapon in the game. And then if you have power armor or advanced power armor, that gives you more pluses to your strength. I think that's +2 or +3, or maybe it's +3 or +4. I can't remember right now, but you can go up pretty high. So you can actually drop strength down pretty low if you would like in this game, if you're planning on rushing power armor, which you can do in this game. You can actually go and get Enclave power armor within like the first hour of playing the game. You don't really need to put this any like higher than 6. I think 6 would be perfectly fine. That uses almost every weapon in the game. There's only a few weapons that require like 7, like the sledgehammer and like the miniguns and a few others. Even the super sledge only requires like 6. Some of the bigger guns and some of the best guns in the game, like the Bowser, only requires 6. Gauss rifle only requires 6. So you do have quite a few options there for potential strength. And like I said, you can go with this lower. This does also affect your HP, how hard you hit with melee and unarmed. You do probably want it higher if you're going with a melee or an unarmed build. And it also determines how much weight you can carry. Carrying around stuff kind of matters in Fallout 2. It depends because you do get a car in this, which has carry space on it. So you can load that up with a lot of weight, as well as if you have companions, you can load them up with a lot of weight too. So strength, not entirely necessary in Fallout 2 for even some of the strongest builds. Unless you're going with melee or unarmed, then probably put it higher. Perception's great to have. This is how accurate you are with your guns, as well as it does give you a couple other bonuses. So perception is actually really good in these older games. Having high perception is nice, especially early on if you want to be using guns, because you don't get a whole lot of bullets. You probably don't have a whole lot of money, especially if you're playing the game normally and you're not rushing certain things. So having higher perception and being able to hit things accurately from a distance is pretty good. So you might want to put that higher. That totally depends. Endurance is how tanky you are, just like how it always is in these games. Determines how many hit points you got, as well as how much radiation and poison resist you got. You don't necessarily need to get this super high though, because you can still put it at like 4 and be able to grab like Life Giver, and Life Giver will get you a lot more HP than what the Endurance kind of would. So it makes it for a pretty strong build there if you plan on going with that perk. If you don't plan on going with that perk, then higher Endurance can be better. Usually I just kind of treat this as a dump stat in these older games, where Endurance is nice to have, but it's never necessary to be super high. Then we got Charisma. Charisma is pretty useful in this game because this one does determine the actions whenever you're talking to people, as well as it makes it so you can have more companions and potentially have kind of better companions in a way. You can still get all the same companions regardless in this game, and companions are pretty strong in Fallout 2, and they're very useful early on because you can get a couple of them pretty early on, and they can protect you quite a bit, as well as draw fire from you. So having higher charisma can be pretty nice in these games. If you plan on doing this solo most of the time though, then you won't really need high charisma. Intelligence is always good. This one makes it so you get more skill points every time that you level up. so you can just put more points into all of these. As well as in Fallout 2, all of your skills can go up to 300% at max. You really don't need to get them that high, but going up to 200% in a certain skill can be really useful. In this one, as opposed to Fallout 1, your skill points do matter because every time that you level up, once you get above 100, your skills will then start taking more than one skill point in order to level up. And this can go all the way up to like 6 points per level, so it can take quite a lot. And that's only for 1% better in each of these skills, or 2% better if they're tagged. So intelligence is pretty nice to have pretty high. Agility is also really good to have high because this gives you more armor class, which is basically your dodge chance. It also dictates your action points. So action points cover basically everything in these games. This is how far you can move, how much you can attack, if you can get into your bag. It is very, very useful to have high agility. And low agility does kind of suck in these games. I think the lowest you can go is like 3 action points in total. Because if you drop this one all the way down, you can have 5 action points. And then I think if you took like Bruiser, yeah, it would drop it down to 3 action points. That's the absolute lowest, and I don't think that would be way great to have. But if you did want to make the game more difficult for yourself, you could do that. And then luck kind of governs everything and kind of governs nothing, just like it usually does in these games. This determines how much crit chance you have, which crits are really, really powerful in this game. Enemies can also hit crits, which makes your day a lot worse in this game. Recently, once I just beat this again, Frank hit me at the very end of the game for a crit that was a 286 damage. I had 125 HP by the time I was getting to him. So even in power armor, he over double killed me with a single hit, and he gets to attack like 3 times. So yeah, luck, don't underestimate it. It can be really strong. Crits can be incredibly powerful with basically every weapon, because nothing really has a crit modifier in these games. As well as it does up the chance of you getting random encounters, which can be kind of good. There are some encounters in this game that can be kind of nice. You could potentially rush like the unique BB gun in this, which is very consistent in terms of damage. It's like 25 to 25 damage, which is better than most rifles, honestly. About the only other rifles that kind of compete with that are like sort of like the sniper rifle, the FAL, and like the Gauss rifle. So if you get that early on, you got a really powerful weapon. You could also get like the Alien Blaster, which is one of the strongest weapons in the game. Having low luck isn't necessarily terrible though either. It just depends on what you're kind of going for. You will hit less crits though, and like I said, crits are pretty nice. For a general build, this really depends on what you want to do. You can drop your strength down a little bit if you're going to go with a guns build, which is kind of nice. So your special stats do depend. Before I build this, let's go over traits because they kind of affect the special stats as well, or at least they can, and kind of what I'd recommend there. So for optional traits, we have a lot of them from Fallout 1 once again. So fast metabolism, you heal faster, but you get less radiation and poison resistance. There are more things that can poison and irradiate you in Fallout 2 than there was in Fallout 1, so this one isn't quite as good in this game as it was in the others, but it's not bad. We've got Bloody Mess, which just makes it so you can splatter things. It actually comes with no downside, and this one doesn't change the ending like it did in Fallout 1. So Bloody Mess, if you don't have anything else to take, you can take this one for free. We've got Bruiser, which gives you 2 more strength with -2 action points. Not really the best in this one. It can be okay for certain builds, like it's still alright for an unarmed build if you plan on going with a power fist, because it's still very action point efficient, not as action efficient as it was in Fallout 1, but it has very like limited use, as well as strength doesn't need to be very high in these games. Then we've got Jinx. This makes it so you're more likely to have critical failures, but so are the enemy. If you have really high luck, then this one is basically just a buff because you're probably not going to have critical failures. And if you have really low luck, then it's going to be a nerf, and it's going to be a very interesting playthrough because you're probably going to have like a lot of unfortunate accidents throughout combat, although enemies will too. Then we got small frame. This is +1 agility for not as much carry weight. This is by 25 carry weight, I believe. Oh wait, no, this is by 50 carry weight in this one. So that's kind of significant. This is going to hurt you in the early game, not being able to carry around as much, but in the late game when you have the car and you can load up your car full of stuff, and if you plan on going with companions and load them full of stuff, then small frame isn't really that big of a nerf, so it can actually be pretty good. We got good nature. This one makes it so all of your combat skills are lowered by a little bit, but it makes it so your first aid, doctor, speech, and barter skills are upped. Not too bad if you're only planning on going with one type of attack style, whether it be small guns, big guns, whatever it might be. Then this one can still be pretty good because it will give you more bonuses to those passive skills, and passive skills are a bit better in this one than they were in the first one. We've got one-hander next, which makes it so one-handed weapons are more accurate, two-handed weapons are less accurate. This still isn't necessarily bad. Most of the best weapons in the game are two-handed weapons, like the Bowser, the Gauss rifle, things like that, the Pulse rifle, but you do have like the Pulse pistol, you've got the Gauss pistol in this one, so you still have some really good endgame options, even if you want to be doing this. And there are a decent amount of early to mid-game weapons that are one-handed, like the 44 Magnum is quite strong, and you can get it right away. You've got the 10mm pistol, which is very strong in the beginning. 10mm submachine gun is quite good. I believe the grease gun is also considered a one-handed gun in this. So you got some options there. They're not bad. And you even have things like the 223 pistol returning once again, which is pretty strong in this. Then we've got Chem Reliance. I don't really like the chem ones. This one makes it so you are more likely to get addicted to chems, but you recover twice as fast from their effects. Chems are useful in this one. They're a lot more useful in this one than they are in the first Fallout game, but still not really one of my favorites. We have Finesse. You do less damage overall. This is by like 25% damage, but you do hit crits about 10% more often. This one's honestly not too bad in this because crits can sway the fight quite a bit in this, depending on what weapon you're using, but it will nerf your damage in the early game. So it's only going to really be useful in the later game. And even then, you can go with like more crits as a perk and generally kind of make up for that anyway, if you want to go with more crits overall. Then we got Chem Resistant. Chems don't last as long, but you're less likely to get addicted. This is better in this game than it was in Fallout 1. Because you are more likely to be using chems, and most of the time if you're spamming chems, you're probably in the middle of the fight and you only need to have the chems last for the fight. You don't need them to last super long, so chem resistance is actually a lot better than like Chem Reliance. Then we got Kamikaze. This one is the same as it was in Fallout 1, where this one just gives you better sequence, which is more chance to go first, but it makes it so you don't have the passive armor class that you normally would, so you're more likely to get hit. I don't really like this one that much. If you have high agility, you're really likely to go first anyway, so this one really doesn't matter. Then we've got Sex Appeal. This one makes it so you are more attractive to the opposite sex, but less attractive in terms of options, mostly speech options, to the same sex. This one kind of depends on what type of character you're going with, and there is a lot more adult themes in Fallout 2 than there was in Fallout 1, and this one, as well as quite a few of the other perks and a lot of your actions in Fallout 2, kind of reflect that. So if you want to take this one, it can be really fun for a character build. I think that this one's kind of neutral. I don't think you're really missing out on too much or gaining too much either way. It just depends. It might help you out in certain parts throughout the game, especially in like New Reno. You can use this one quite a few times on quite a few different characters, whether you're male or female. Up next, we got Heavy Handed. This is more damage with melee and unarmed, but less crit damage and less crits overall. This one can still be good on those builds, because if you do take like better crits with this and you get Slayer at level 24 in this game, you're still guaranteed crits on every hit. So it's going to kind of buff you in the early game, sort of nerf you in the mid game, and then still be kind of a buff towards the end game for both melee and unarmed. So if you want to take that, go for it. If you're not using melee or unarmed, skip this one. Skilled gives you more skill points overall, but it does raise your perk level up by 1. So normally you get a perk every 3 levels. With skilled, you get it every 4 levels, which is pretty bad. That one's actually really not nice, because in Fallout 2, you will be getting up quite a few levels. Unlike Fallout 1, where you're probably going to be beating the game at like level 15, level 16, you're probably not going to be beating Fallout 2 until you're like level 24, 25, maybe up to like 30 or so. So there is actually quite a big gap there where you're going to be missing out on perks that could make your character quite a bit better. And I don't think the skill point buff in the early game is going to matter that much, so I would not recommend it in this game. Then we got Fast Shot. This makes it so all of your ranged attacks in this one is actually fixed in this game, cost 1 less action point, but you can no longer do aim shots. Aim shots do a lot of damage, because you can aim for like the eyes of somebody with a Gauss rifle and do tons of damage thanks to that. But this won't affect weapons that fire in burst. Like the Bowser will only benefit from this if you plan on using that weapon, because it can't do aim shots anyway. It can only do burst fire shots. So this is just a bonus for those weapons. It's no longer as strong as it was in Fallout 1, where it counted for every weapon, and that made the Power Fist absolutely insane, because then you could attack like 13 times, I think, in total with the Power Fist in one turn, where you couldn't do that if you didn't have Fast Shot. So yeah, that was kind of crazy. It's still quite good in this game though. And then we've got Gifted, still probably one of the most busted traits in Fallout's history. This one gives you +1 to all of your special stats. It does nerf your overall skills, and it does nerf the amount of skill points you get per level by 5, but giving +1 to all of your special stats is so impactful in these games, because your special stats do matter pretty heavily in these. So it's very strong, and I'd recommend it for basically everybody. It also makes it so builds are just way more flexible than they otherwise would be, where you don't have to be divvying up points all the same. Like, you could just keep it like this and go +7 and have 7s and everything. That can be pretty strong if you want to do that. For an overall build that I'd recommend for these type of things, I would recommend Gifted, because it's going to make everything just a whole lot easier for you in the long run. It will nerf you in the early game, but later game it's going to be helping you out so much, and it just makes it so your builds are so flexible. And then after that, it's kind of your choice. Fast Shot is a really good one if you want to be going with big guns, where they are very strong in this game. It's still pretty strong with small guns and energy weapons too. If you're going to go with melee or unarmed, then Fast Shot really doesn't help you, so I would say skip that. A small frame is also really good on these type of builds, because that's just +1 more agility, and if you plan on rushing the car, then you don't really care about the extra carry weight. It's not that big of a deal, and if you have companions, even more so. So it's your choice. My last playthrough I did Fast Shot and Gifted, but small frame and Gifted is also pretty good, or one-hander and Gifted if you like using pistols. For the strength, usually I would go a little bit lower, maybe like 4 strength. This is going to hurt us in the early game, but it will be pretty nice in the late game, and if you plan on rushing the power armor, this is going to jump up pretty high, and you're going to be able to use every weapon then, so that's pretty good. Perception I usually put a little bit higher. Sometimes I'll max this out to 10, other times I'll just go to the 9. This just gives me better accuracy overall, and it makes it so I can hit my shots pretty accurately. For endurance, endurance is kind of your choice. This is more of a dump stat for me, so I just kind of put whatever else I need into this. Same thing goes with charisma. If I want to have companions, I'll put this higher. If I don't, then I'll put it lower. This last time I didn't play with companions, so I put it pretty low. My intelligence I put pretty high, just so that I could be getting skill points and kind of offset the amount of skill points I was losing from Gifted. Then agility I also set to max, just so I could have the maximum amount of armor class and action points, so I can move around the most. And then you could divvy up points between luck and endurance, whichever one you kind of want to prefer. For me, I went with like 4 endurance, just so that I could hit Life Giver and max that one out. And then I went up to like 9 luck, or 8 luck, and then like 10 perception. That way I could have some pretty hard-hitting weapons and be hitting crits. Again, this build overall is going to be kind of weak in the early game, and it's kind of going to struggle even in the tutorial, but it will be really, really strong towards the end game. So this is kind of like a min-max build for mostly guns. If you're not going with that and you're going with more of like unarmed and melee, then you'd probably want to maybe drop down like perception quite a bit more, because you would really only need it for the perks then. Buff up strength and endurance a little bit more, and then you'd probably be good to go. Let's talk about the skills now. So for skills, we've got small guns. Small guns is still very, very strong in Fallout 2. This is going to be the most common gun type that you find. These are pistols, submachine guns, rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, anything like that fits into the small guns. Some of the best weapons in the game are small guns still. You have like the Gauss pistol, the Gauss rifle, which are top tier weapons by the end of the game. You have multiple combat shotguns in this, including like the Pancor jackhammer, which is very, very strong. You have the FAL, which is quite strong. In the early game, you're pretty much only given small arms. You're not given big guns or energy weapons or anything. So it's really powerful there. So tagging small guns can be a really good option, and something that I'd probably recommend for most people to tag, at least for your first playthrough. Once you get through like one playthrough, then you may want to swap it out for something else. Then for big guns are actually really good in this. Unlike Fallout 1, where they're basically at the very end of the game and there's only 3 of them, this one has some really strong big guns. And you can get about halfway through the game and start getting access to the big guns, or you can rush certain ones. Like, you can get like the Bowser, which is incredibly powerful. That's probably the best big gun in the game. You can still get things like the rocket launcher, the flamethrower. There's 3 different miniguns in this. So you do have options there. Big guns are very, very solid. So if you want to take it, go for it. I did that my last run and it was pretty solid. Then we've got energy weapons, also really good in this game and generally considered some of the best in these early games. They do a ton of damage. You can rush some of these early on, like if you want to rush the power armor, you're guaranteed to also get like the plasma rifle there, I believe, at the Enclave place, and some ammo for it, as well as I think you can get a plasma and a laser pistol there too, which are very strong. You can also run back to the Brotherhood if you're planning on doing that, and you can get things like the pulse rifle and the pulse pistol, which are 2 of the best weapons in the game. So energy weapons, very solid, and if you plan on doing that strat, it's going to make it very easy for you to play through pretty much the whole game. Then we've got unarmed. Unarmed is really good. I recommend that you tag either unarmed or melee, because the tutorial in this game is kind of tough, and you don't get any guns in the tutorial. There's not a whole lot of things. There's actually only one thing that you kind of have to fight. You can do it a pacifist way if you have high steel, though, to where you can just steal the key and leave the place. But otherwise, you have to fight a guy with unarmed, and he is pretty tough. He can beat you up pretty bad, and you can can die in the tutorial pretty easily in this, as well as there's just a bunch of scorpions and ants that you got to fight in the tutorial. Well, again, you can run past them if you'd like, but generally most people are probably going to fight them, and unarmed and melee are by far the easiest to fight those with. They give you the highest percent chance of hitting, and there is no guns in the tutorial. You only get a spear or your bare hands, and that's it. So I would say pick one of these, because they're going to be very, very handy for you to have in the early game. Then we've got throwing. Throwing can also be kind of useful because there's more melee weapons in this that can be thrown, like the spear, and you can get a couple of those. As well as this will also be things like throwing knives, grenades, which can be pretty good too. Throwing isn't terrible, but I wouldn't really recommend it as a primary attack. It's more useful as an engagement against multiple enemies, especially in the early game, if you get some like grenades. Because in the early game, there can be groups of enemies, and if you toss it into the middle of them, even if it's just to soften them up, that does help overall. So throwing is not a bad one to be taking in these games. Then we've got First Aid and Doctor. These are kind of similar skills, but these ones can allow you just to heal yourself. Doctor allows you to heal more things like broken limbs or damaging your eye or whatever it might be. You do need a doctor's bag for that one. You need first aid kits or other first aid supplies for the first aid, and that's more for getting your HP back. And that way you don't have to be using like your healing powder for it, so you can save that, which also nerfs your perception, which nerfs your accuracy if you're using guns. So can be kind of useful. Sneak is good for just sneaking around to certain areas if you plan on stealing stuff, or if you want to do like some sneak hits on enemies. It's really good for melee or unarmed too, so if you want to take that, go for it. Lockpicking is very useful because there's a lot of areas where you can use lockpicks to open up areas, although almost everything that you can open up with a lockpick, you can probably also open it with an explosive. So you can solve a lot of your problems thanks to just blowing stuff up. Lockpicking can be useful to take though. Stealing can also be useful. You can get a lot of money this way. It's also really easy if you just want to save scum. So that certainly helps. But yeah, if you want extra money, stealing's pretty good. So if you want to pick that one, go for it. Traps are okay. You can disarm certain traps, and there are certain areas that this is pretty useful in. You're probably going to step across them first before you realize there's a trap there, and then have to reload a save to like try to open it anyway, but you can do that. This also helps with you setting traps, because if you don't have high enough traps and you go to put down like dynamite or C4 that has a timer on it, then it will go off kind of randomly. It doesn't really go off the timer settings because you just don't have high enough traps to really make it work, which can be kind of annoying, especially if you forget about it and you blow yourself up. That's not good, but it can be useful for blowing up multiple enemies too. Then we got Science. Science is more useful in this than it was in Fallout 1. You can use this to just learn a lot more things and get into computers, as well as a couple other things that you can do throughout the game. So this one's kind of nice to have. Like, I wouldn't really tag it because you can get books for it and get it up that way. Same thing goes with repair. You don't repair your own weapons in this, nor can you upgrade your own weapons. You have to go to somebody else to get upgrades, and there's no repairing of weapons in this. So this is just repairing stuff for like extra XP or for getting through certain parts of quests a little bit easier. Kind of useful, but you can get books for it, and that helps you out. Speech is really good if you want to get into quite a few areas, if you want to do certain quests, and if you want to get the best rewards. Tagging speech is really nice. It pretty much always is. Barter is good for making extra money, as you would kind of expect. That one's pretty straightforward. Gambling, basically the same thing as barter. It's just you have a chance of potentially getting better odds with this, or potentially getting free loot, basically. So gambling, kind of nice. And Outdoorsman is actually really good to be taking, especially if you want to be rushing the power armor early on. If you're doing that, then I'd probably recommend that you tag something like Outdoorsman, Unarmed, and Small Guns. This is going to make it the easiest for you to do, because Outdoorsman is kind of limited in its overall usefulness, but it is very, very good if you want to rush that particular strategy. That makes it super simple. The main reason why is because Outdoorsman makes it so you are able to skip random events that you might run into. So let's say you run into a pack of rad scorpions. If you have high Outdoorsman, there's probably going to be a chance that you can just ignore them and go on. And every time you do this, you actually get XP, which is kind of cool. You don't get as much as actually going there and fighting the enemies usually, but still a little bit of XP is good. And just being able to see what you're planning on running into is nice, because let's say you're in the early game and you're trying to go for the power armor and you run into an Enclave patrol, you're pretty much dead. Doesn't really matter how much HP you have, you're probably going to get one or two shot by them, and that's just going to be it. So having high Outdoorsman can be really, really useful if you're doing that. The main reason why I say this one's limiting, though, is because it really only helps once you get up to 100. Anything past 100 is basically useless. You don't need to have it. It's not really going to help you, and it's kind of a waste of points then. As well as there is a skill book to raise this up with the Scout magazine, so You could kind of just do that. It depends on what you're doing, though. I would say tag this if you plan on rushing the Enclave armor early on and the other gear that you can get. If not, probably don't tag it and pick something else. Maybe another weapon type, or maybe one of these other skills to kind of help you out in the early game. Maybe something like speech or barter or whatever it might be. Those are pretty useful. Another strategy that you can kind of do, and a little hint for starting out, is even if you want to go with something like big guns or energy weapons later on, but you're okay with using like small guns or unarmed or something early on, is you can still put points into these, and then you can pick the tagged perk, which is actually really good in these old games, and then pick that one, and it will pretty much double the amount of skill points that you got for that skill that you already put in. That is really useful because it can actually even be better than that once you tag it like above 100% for any weapon. As soon as I hit level, I think it's 16 for tagged in this, tag that one. I've already put a bunch of points into energy weapons. It jumps up. Now it's better than small guns. I can swap over to energy weapons right away. And now my build is so much stronger than it would be otherwise. Either way, this is a starting guide for Fallout 2. I will probably be doing a guide on how to go and get all the Enclave stuff if you would like early on, because that is pretty strong in these games, as well as I will be doing like a perk tier list and weapon tier list like I kind of have with Fallout 1. Haven't got around to the weapons just yet, at least as of making this video. But either way, thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope this helped you out. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.